You are listening to the Overwatch League Network, the podcast with Deadeye on all the Overwatch League news and information. The show with Tactical Visor on the statistics and analysis. Here are your hosts, Totally Drunk, Spider, and Slambo.
What is up, guys, and welcome back to Overwatch League Network, the podcast with Deadeye on all the latest Overwatch League news, information, and esports analysis. I am your host, Totally Drunk, and tonight on episode 45, we're going to go around the league discussing the latest Overwatch League news. Bird Dad retires from professional Overwatch, the Soulmates are getting an academy team, KR Contenders wraps up, and we'll preview next week's World Cup group stage. But before we can get into the news and introduce you to my co-hosts, I just want to take a moment to thank everyone who is hanging out with us tonight, live for our Twitch show, and of course, thank all of our repeat listeners. And as you can tell, back with us yet again is my co-host, my soulmate. He's been a little bit, in the abyss for a while now, but he is in place of Spider, because Spider's doing his own thing for tonight. It's obviously a big day for Warcraft. He's out doing, server-side stuff with some friends, helping them get their whole PC up and running. But Slambo, good to have you back, brother. How have you been?
Oh, what's up, nerd? Man, it feels good to be back, Totem. I have been in the abyss, to your point. I have been hiding. No, I've been at various places across the country, Wichita, Omaha, Phoenix, and very much related, Totem, Atlanta as well, which we will get to a little bit later in the show. But I feel rejuvenated. At the same time, I feel a bit lost. I feel like I have so much for you and I to get caught up on. There's so much we haven't got a chance to really even talk about, because, much less the show, I'm not around to even game as much, whenever everyone else is on. So anyway, I know we have a lot of great information to cover, so I won't bore the show with anything in my side. I'm just really stoked to be here and looking forward to breaking down some huge news, even though the season, alas, is over.
And not only that, but, we get to talk a little bit about one of the teams that we have been following for years and their big moments, but we'll get into that when we talk about contenders. So let's go ahead, let's jump into this week's Overwatch League news as we go around the league. So, in prior weeks, we talked about some of the rumors kind of circulating about the expansion teams, and we do know that two of these teams are confirmed expansion teams. So we have Atlanta, Georgia, and Guangzhou, China, are official expansion teams, so that will bring the total franchises in the Overwatch League to 14. So we're still looking at adding up to 4 more expansion teams in the coming weeks ahead, and as we've mentioned, Atlanta's franchise is owned by Cox Enterprises and Province Incorporated, which is I don't know how exactly that correlates, but I know, in regards to, the whole esports scene in Atlanta, they're really hoping, with the esports venture, that the scene is going to prosper much like it did for their MLS team, the Atlanta United. And, you've been in Atlanta, so, we've been kind of, scratching our heads, was what's going on?
I wish that the two things were related. Well, what I will tell you is that I do work for a branch of Cox Enterprises. So that's kind of made up of 3 different branches, a huge corporation. So I'm a part of one of those pieces, and I'm not affiliated with this other branch. And it actually was public record. It's public news, so nothing I'm leaking or anything like that. But the company was saying, hey, we're going to take some of these resources and we're going to use them in a different way. And everyone across the company was going, what's going on? What does that mean? What do you mean in a different way? How do you do that differently? And then I saw the news on ESPN and I was like, oh, there's a link here before it even was really out, So I was reaching out to some people that were like, that may or may not be coming soon, just why don't you relax on that? So, I mean, certainly there was a very visceral, emotional experience that I had finding the news and everything. And I am kind of attached to that company in some sense. And I really think it's a very smart move. You know, they're taking some of the resources and they're reapplying them into esports. It's really totem the term that I've been using since I've been on podcasts with Overwatch, and it's a word apparently I've been looking or having a need to satiate, but that is validation, and this is just further validation that the company that I believe in and that a company that I'm chosen to put in time, and I'm going to continue to work there for a very long time. And I'm confident to say that publicly, right? That's crazy. But I've always believed in the decisions they make and the way they look at the world. They always try to, be progressive in some ways. So I was just, again, for my peers and coworkers that know my love for Overwatch and what we do, I was getting emails. People thought I was the reason the team came. People thought I was in Atlanta, like you said, pitching to the executives and stuff. Like, I assure you that was not me. Way smarter people took care of all this behind the scenes and analyzed the opportunity. But yeah, and so forgive me for going on this long tangent, but I've just been waiting to talk about it because, again, it's been weeks and I've been just bursting with excitement. And so anyway, I'm looking forward to what it may mean, but I'm definitely going to, find myself following this team really well. Like I'm never giving up my Soul Dynasty as my first team, but I may have to also be a very strong advocate for this team just for company responsibility totem, just for that in and of itself, right?
Yeah, and I thought it was so funny though because I had two initial thoughts whenever I saw Atlanta pop up. Because first I saw it was Cox Enterprises, kind of back in the franchise. I'm like, okay, so Slambo is somehow involved with this, and I'm like, wait a minute, Atlanta. I know another podcaster from a pretty well known. Overwatch podcast out there. Andres from Omnic Lab. And I'm like, something's going on here. And then I'm like, sure enough, they pick Atlanta before Chicago. And, there's some other news that might dwindle Chicago's chances a little bit more, which I am not too thrilled about.
Right.
But regardless, I'm just waiting to hear more about, the Brandon. I was hoping with China Joy going on around the same time that the Guangzhou news had hit, that maybe we would have gotten a little bit more of a tease there, but that didn't happen. So who knows? Maybe this is something that might circulate during the World Cup stages. We don't know. So obviously we still have an influx of news that's going to be coming our way within the next couple of months in regards to these expansion teams and, sign-ins. Brandon, all of that good stuff, but it's always good knowing that we are getting closer and closer to filling that, 6 team expansion slots that we have going forward. So regardless, obviously Season 2 was ramping up. There's a lot of speculation. We kind of hit a lot last week on Heroes Never Die about possible improvements that we could be seeing for Season 2. And one of the things that we might be seeing, which has been definitely one of the key features that the viewers have been wanting, is single-player cameras. So, obviously, over the past couple of years, the viewing experience for Overwatch and Overwatch esports has changed drastically. We saw the introduction of the whole home and away skins, which just made it visually more appealing. You didn't have to question whose ability was coming from which team when there were, mirror compositions on both sides. We've seen, the smart cameras that kind of, attach to someone's shoulder and, follow them around, so, that's been smoothed out. But, there's still some issues with the game when it comes to, constant camera shifts. And just due to the fact that Overwatch is an arena-based game, that sort of high-speed mentality can cause some discomfort for some viewers out there. But the Overwatch League executives have been looking at the single player view, and it's definitely the most optioned for feature that the viewers want. So do you feel like single player cameras is something that we are going to see? Could this be something that could be tied into the All Access Pass as one of the additional perks?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the biggest thing is that the technology to deliver this is the part that I'm starting to really trying to envision and struggle with, because really there's only 2 routes you go. You're going to go client based. So then I think that's a bit easier than you really are in the interface like you are in Spectator. And we already have a way to do that. Again, that's different because the spectator slots in a game goes what max to 10 or 20. I mean, I think it's 10. It doesn't matter. The point is, it's not that many. What we're going to expect is thousands of people individually viewing that one player. So even if it is client based and the technology's there, I don't know how the whole the structure of that would work. Then I think of it being like Twitch based or website HTML based, and then it's going to need to have just a lot of individual streams going up. So it's going to be a lot of work and a lot of bandwidth to cover all the different cameras, all the different broadcasts, all the different languages, on top of all the talent cameras. And then we're talking about, the 6 different, which are already there constantly on.
Mm-hmm.
But then being able to like tune into those individually and switch between the players without having to manually change the page, like the Twitch page itself, like click to different players. I'm just trying to, contemplate that in my head. Again, way smarter people are going to figure out what the answer to that question is. But ultimately, Totem, I know I'm like really fixated on the delivery mechanism, but I really should answer the question that I feel like it's very important, because think about Overwatch as like that you identify with that character. So often, sometimes because you're in that role with tank support, it's really what it's kind of become, even in like competitive games. You identify with the players that play in those roles. So ultimately, you get the most out of your viewing experience from watching a main tank player main tank the whole match and just watch their decision making and their thought process. It's a more enjoyable experience for you. So a lot of, I guess a lot of people that probably play the game are going to use this feature, and a little more of the hardcore fan base. Again, it's very clamored for and asked for feature. But at the same time, I just don't know if every person's going to take advantage of this or even have to pay for the all access pass, to even get access to it. Is that going to be a gate to get there? Are you going to need to, pay that anyway? So that's a lot of different switches and levers are still moving here on this. But I kind of at least have some concerns on the level of participation it's going to have. Now, selfishly, yeah, for me, I think this is ideal. I think I would be in love with this system, but that's kind of the answer we have to almost every piece of news that comes out when it comes to anything exclusive or battle pass. I'm like, yeah, here's my money and I'll take it. So I think this would be a nice addition to that. So again, but I'm the wrong person to be asking.
Yeah, like, for me, like, obviously, like, with the normal viewing experience, a lot of times it is fixated on the DPS. So having a way to kind of view either, like, main support is obviously one of the most vital roles, and, it's very hard to, it's harder to see the better plays as it is to realize when there's, like, a mistake by a main support. So I'm hoping with like a single player camera that will help alleviate some of the issues that some of these players are getting. But I don't know whether or not the technology is there, but I would love to see like who the most viewed player is in the Overwatch League, or the most viewed hero, or which team is viewed the most in a single player camera type environment. But if I had to guess, I'd say we're probably not going to be there for season 2. I'd love for us to be there by season 3 once, we start to actually travel to different arenas. But I think it's still a little bit too early to tell with single player camps, but it's definitely something I want to see in the future for sure. And speaking of expansion teams, guys, we do have another update, and this is another one that is kind of
fresh off the press,
according to sources. So take that for what you will. But Toronto is looking to be one of the expansion teams next season, and there's a familiar organization in esports org that is returning to the scene, that being Splice. So Splice is looking to be brought on to manage the team, similar to the role that the Sentinels serve for the LA Gladiators. So Toronto team would mark the first Overwatch League franchise in Canada. And Toronto is the largest city in Canada, and it already has home to major sports franchises throughout several different sports leagues, basically. So like NBA, MLB, NHL, MLS, as well as the CFL. And Splice, this is kind of like going back a bit. Splice would be making a return after first entering the scene back in the summer of 2016. And this is where I know Clockwork was with Splice. I'm trying to remember who else was on that roster. It was so long ago. But Splice was...
I want to say Steel or some player from Counter Strike that played for a short while. Papa Smurf, I think, tanked for them for a brief minute,
I know
and then
Flame was with them.
I want to say either Rolf or another support player that was on. Oh man, oh my gosh, it's been like it feels like it wasn't. It was so yesterday, but it was like 2 years ago. Some of this
Hmm.
stuff that I'm trying to talk about, but yeah, that Spice roster. I know Clockwork was on it, that you said, but man, there's somebody else I'm like forgetting on the tip of my tongue that I think switched back to Counter Strike or went to PUBG or something as well. So a team that didn't actually achieve much, I think when they were out, it was like
Right.
a decent roster, but I do remember them never really being that impressive. But again, no knock on them, just but either way, I'm stoked for this one. I think Canada needed a good team. I love the city of Toronto. It's a very diverse city. It has a very accepting culture and some very intense and passionate sports fans see the Toronto Blue Jays. I believe they're nuts.
Hmm.
But no, man, I definitely think this is a good move. And we need some XQC rumors to pop back up. That's what we need, Totem. So this is a good way to get that churning, getting it moving.
I mean, they finally added the Canada flag to the summer game loot boxes, so it's only a matter of time before they announce a Canadian Overwatch League team. I'm just saying.
Hey, man,
But it's
definitely a connection there.
I always like seeing like these former like Overwatch teams or organizations that were in the scene returning back to the scene, because this is a team that kind of like backed out like even before like the Overwatch League talks were even started, and now they're maybe they're not coming back fully as a team, but they'll at least be managing this upcoming expansion team. But really for me it's just like, okay, well, there's gonna be two new NA teams, so not looking so hot, Slambo, for Chicago to get a team, knowing that a lot of the focus for season 2 is going to be expansion in Europe at this point.
I don't know. I don't think it's all over for another North American slot, but I definitely know with the Paris rumor, which I believe is a little more than a rumor, but I think it could be very possible we get another Southeast Asian slot and then another European slot because there's already a deep saturation into the U.S. market. But I just think we're missing an opportunity here with the Midwest or the central part of the country for that whole regional aspect. So I wouldn't count it out that another city just kind of surprises us here. A Cleveland, a St. Paul, Minnesota, the Twin Cities area, maybe Milwaukee. I mean, it could be out of nowhere. We could have something really big. I wish I could say Kansas City, but that's not going to happen. I mean, not yet. I know that community's got some great nerds there, but it's just not. I don't think it's going to work yet. I'm not the size they need right now.
We will get there eventually, maybe in season 3. But we have an update on one of the Dallas Fuel players, that being Seagull. So we got some pretty big news that Seagull is actually going to be retiring from professional Overwatch. So Seagull really needs no introduction. This has been a fan favorite for quite some time, and he's looking to focus back on streaming again moving forward. So Seagull, he had joined Team Envy, or Envious, back in 2017 after they went undefeated in the regular season through Contenders in a 2017, and then when he did join Envy, they would go on to win the championship in the playoffs. So Seagull would go on to play some pretty key roles for the Dallas Fuel in season 1, amidst the cluster F of a season as it was, and he picked up the off-tank role, and he looked damn promising on the diva role, and we were always talking high praise on just his in-game knowledge and mechanical skill at that role, and at times he did still provide DBS potential for the team, but this is a guy who always dreamed of being a pro player. But there's no doubt that being a pro player had an effect on Seagull. Leading up to the Overwatch League, Seagull did put on some weight. He got sleep apnea, and a part of him had to have felt like he was kind of leaving his Twitch fan base behind. And he's basically just looking at returning to playing Overwatch as a hobby since he won't have that added stress of, one, being on the Dallas Fuel, and two, the stress of winning in the Overwatch League. So I know his streams have been jam-packed, and when we talk about Twitch numbers, Siegel was always kind of at the forefront for Overwatch, so I'm just glad to kind of have him back in that role because it will help the longevity of Twitch stream in Overwatch in the future as well.
Oh man, this is I wish it was more sad. I think a lot of people are taking it as like this complete kind of a bummer, but I think that's from the perspective of purely the Overwatch League. I think this is a win for Overwatch though. I think to your point, he has a certain appeal to him, a certain style that's very calm and educational and laid back. And I think that we need a little bit more of that. Sometimes in the Overwatch world, we do have a very loud and volatile personality that's often very popular too. And so, I don't know. I just feel like it's good. It's a good thing. And really for him, I shouldn't focus on how it's good for everyone else. It's really good for him as in person and an individual. He just wasn't happy. I mean, those type of things scare me, man. When you're talking about sleep apnea, I mean, people die, like that's like a pretty, it's a pretty real thing to develop. I mean, it's a real, I guess I haven't even been there. I've been very stressed with work, sure. I've gone all over the place and I've traveled a lot and I've missed that, my daughter and stuff. But that, I mean, like that's silly stuff compared to like what these guys are going through. And then again, in perspective, what these guys are going through is nothing compared to what our military, what other people go through. Again, I'm not trying to compare that. I'm just trying to say that is really scary, for people to be able to develop sleep apnea. And I mean, the way we've heard other players like Taimu go through that in the past, I have to imagine it's just a lot of stress and that regiment and that intensity. It will wear you down. Not everybody's personality is designed for it. So really for all those reasons, I'm very happy for Brandon here. I will be looking forward to tuning into his stream and supporting him. I think that there are plenty of very talented players who want to be on a roster. And if he's not in it heart, first and head first, he does that. The organization doesn't deserve that. His teammates don't deserve that. So again, I think this is more of a positive for everybody as long as everybody's, shaking hands and yeah, the Dallas Fuel went out of their way to be very kind in this goodbye, very professional, very cordial. It definitely is not a bad breakup like we've seen with some other players and some other things in particular on this roster. Anyway, good luck to you, Siegel. It's been a pleasure, but we'll continue to be supporters and fans here at the Overwatch League Network.
Yeah, and if the past couple of days have been any, notification, his viewers is going to be up because of another former Dallas Fuel player being kind of suspended from Overwatch.
Weird. I'm like trying not to talk about him too, but of course,
it all comes full circle.
It all comes back to XQC.
Oh well. Anyways, on a more positive note, as a soulmate, we have something to look forward to in future seasons of Contenders because Genji, who is the parent organization of the Seoul Dynasty, is recruiting players and coaches for Contenders Korea Season 3. So this team would serve as the Seoul Dynasty's academy team. And they're looking to recruit players rather than buying out an existing Korean Contenders team. I'm not sure how I feel about that, but, we'll talk about another team that might be Overwatch League ready. So, as of right now, when we look at the Overwatch League franchises, not including the expansion teams, Dynasty are only one of two Overwatch League teams that do not have an academy team in Contenders. The only other Overwatch League team that does not have one is the LA Valiant. So, assuming the academy team goes through, this would mark the first academy team in Contenders Korea, which without question is the most competitive scene in Contenders to date, and we had a hell of a grand finals, which we'll be talking about later.
Surprise! This region's really exciting. Surprise!
I know, it's only kind of been at the forefront of competitive Overwatch since day one, just about. But I'm not sure how I feel about recruiting players over just trying to bring in one of the more established teams that are already in the region. I'm of two minds because we've seen some mainstays that have been around the scene for quite some time that have had some struggles like reaching like the end game, really. Like, there are teams that seem to always do good, but maybe come up a little bit short in the playoffs. We have some teams that are always like kind of on the brink, but don't actually make it. Or we have had some cases where teams make it to the finals and just can't seem to win, the big game. So for Contenders Korea, like, there's just talent everywhere. So when we talk about recruiting players, like, I feel like I'm more at ease knowing just how much talent is out there, because when you look at the field for Contenders Korea, there's top talent just spread out, just kind of like across the board. So you can kind of like nitpick and take some pieces from here and some pieces from there and really come out with a really strong looking academy team. But I'm just glad now that, not only from the Overwatch League level, we'll have the opportunity to maybe some of those dynasty players that, are returning to the team that haven't quite seen the amount of play time that they need, they can act as a two-way player and really help out this academy team moving forward in season 3.
Yeah, I'm really curious to see exactly how this is all going to shake out. There's going to be such a power vacuum after these expansion teams hit. And so I think this region is going to feel that shockwave more than any other region when that happens. And I'm just, I don't know. I feel like that is going to be a lot of that talent is going to be scooped off the top for those big name rosters. And then what you're going to have left over is not an opportunity to pick up a full roster like everyone would like to do possibly, but it's really going to be, you're going to have to pick and piece together some type of synergy, some type of flexibility with the hero lineup. Because again, a large portion of whole rosters and individuals are going to be scooped up, potentially, or looking to be scooped up and, already forming some of those alliances possibly here in the near future. So I feel like, again, there's a lot of what ifs, and I know you're asking me which way it's going to go, but I feel like, kind of to your point, no matter what happens in Korea as a region, South Korea, is as soon as there is a vacuum and teams do leave or there's new names in there, we very quickly start to develop the next level way quicker than we're doing here in North America and Europe. Like, that talent just rises that much quicker because, again, of their practice structure and all that, blah, blah, blah. But either way, I just really don't know if this region is going, I don't know what it's going to look like once these expansion teams hit. And then I guess I'm also not worried about it, Totem, because once it is all cleared out, it's going to be the most competitive region in about 3 to 6 months, So I really am not worried about Korea. We're going to continue to see it to be a farm of talent and top players emerging in the scene. And I don't think you can really go a lot of wrong directions because, to your point, I mean, great in this league is like the middle. A lot of teams are just kind of stuck in that 2 to 5 range permanently. And that's still really good in this region. Anywhere else, they'd be top team. It's a different kind of meat grinder here.
And it's been interesting because, like, when we kind of like look at the Contenders like landscape, we have seen quite a bit of Korean talent kind of get situated into like North America as well with some of these other academy teams. For me, I'm just kind of curious to see, well, once this academy team comes to fruition, where exactly is that going to place them? Are they going to have to, battle their way starting that open division? Are they just going to place them in, say, like Contenders trials? Will they just go straight to Contenders if they're not buying out an existing Contenders team?
It's a good question.
We just don't know where that's going to be, because like we have seen some other academy teams that have actually fallen into trials. There's actually 2 teams that have done that. One of them actually being the academy team for the London Spitfire. So, that was a pretty big blow after they lost Craggy. So Hurricane are back in trials, having to earn their way back. As well as the Houston Outlaws academy team are also in the same boat. So I would assume that they would just have to earn their way in. It's just a matter of, well, do they start from, the first run, or do they go from the second run where they only have to, go through trials? So that's definitely something to keep an eye on. moving forward. But either way, Korea is going to be stacked no matter what. And even if, they, let's say, like, they take, like, the top 15, 20 players, whatever from Korea, it's really not going to change the landscape all that much. It's just a matter of which core rosters are going to be kind of, like, situated into the Overwatch League, or is it just going to be more of a case of these expansion teams, if they are looking at this region in particular, just nitpicking at different pieces or duos, tank lines, support lines, whatever. But either way, Korea is going to be just fine like it always is, and, they always bring some of the best competitive Overwatch moving forward, so definitely something to be keeping an eye on as things kind of unfold over, all these roster moves moving forward. But anyways, we have some updates on the Overwatch League All-Star game, and, we have some details. So first up, this is something that we missed last week since we took the week off. We do have a replacement on one of the rosters, and the Overwatch League Finals MVP Prophet is going to be in the All-Star game, and he'll be replacing Birdreen. So, Birdreen is basically just looking to get some extended rest from his wrist injury that he suffered a while ago. He didn't re-injure it or anything like that.
Totem, you know well that the moment the Seagull news was announced was the moment the Birdring news came out. It's clearly a Bird Brother play.
Mm-hmm.
If one Bird Brother's going down, the other Bird Brother's got to fly.
Yeah,
that's all I'm saying.
They shot two birds with one stone, basically. Yeah, so, Birdreen, he's still trying to get over it, just like it was when he injured his wrist. And, obviously losing Seagull was a very big blow to Birdreen. So, yes, press F to pay respects and all of that. So, for the All-Star Weekend, that will be kicking off on August 25th with a series of custom skill matches. So, this is what we're going to get, Slambo. We have Lucio Ball Showdown. We have Mystery Heroes.
Woo!
Widowmaker 1v1, which was definitely one of the more sought-after ones in there. We have Lockout Elimination. And then we have Talent Takedown, which will basically have teams of, Overwatch League casters and analysis. So that should be interesting.
Woo.
We'll see whether or not the Brenji can carry a team to victory.
Dude, I'm so embarrassed for him already. I've seen him play. And he's better at Genji than I'll ever be. I'm just not a Genji player. But god dang, man, he's going to be embarrassed. It's going to look like he's walking around in sludge. I'll call it now.
I like it. But, I'm just excited we're going to get the Widowmaker 1v1. I'm not sure exactly how that's going to pan out. Maybe they're just going to do... I don't know if they're doing an FFA at the start and then the final one's going to be 1v1 or what the situation that's going to be. But, Mystery Heroes can just be complete RNG fest like it always is. And, it could just come down to who gets the most tanks early on. Because that seems to be the win condition in most cases in arcade.
Right, yeah. I feel like it's going to be just a lot of... That's the point of this, I know, but it is just going to be a lot of RNG. I certainly would love to see the talent, though, take a round or take a win off the pros, just due to some craziness or something. It'd be fantastic. But I don't know. Which one are you most interested in? Because I think I'm most interested in the Lucio Ball. Because these guys are going to take it serious and use real FIFA tactics and real high level Lucio Ball stuff. I think so, man. I don't know. That's what I'm excited for.
Well, for me, I'm most excited about the Widowmaker 1v1 just because that's kind of been the focal point of a lot of the Overwatch League. For me, I know with Lockout Elimination, there's going to be only, so many different strategies that we're going to see. So I don't see the amount of complexity as much in that one. But Lucio Ball is definitely probably my second choice out of the lot that we're getting. And on Sunday, that's when we will have the official All-Star game, which will pit the Atlantic Division All-Stars up against the Pacific Division. So the teams will be playing in a 5-map series, so we'll be playing on Kings Row, Rialto, Horizon, Lunar Colony, Route 66, and Ilios. So substitutions are only available between maps in this one. And we do have an update on the All-Star skins. This was one of the biggest questions we had how are we going to obtain the All-Star skins? And they're going to be purchasable from August 17th through the 27th for 300 Overwatch League tokens. Or if, you spend that money, that'll set you back $20. And I have to say, I was not happy when I saw this number. For one, like, I would have been fine if they just did, like, in-game currency, not the
Mm-hmm.
Overwatch League currency. But, man, I was really hoping it would just be tune in, get the skins, and that would be the end of it. But nope, we gotta shill out some tokens, and unfortunately, I know I don't have leftover Overwatch League tokens. I don't know what your situation is, but man, was I gutted to know that if I want these skins, it's basically, $10 a pop.
Pop, pop. I mean, it's again one of those elite level items that the super fans, the collectors want to grab. And so a lot of people are going to be filling out their collection. And then a lot of people that just play these two heroes are going to pay that money that aren't even into Overwatch League because these are very, what's the right word? These are very sexy skins, Totem. I mean, I'm going to let you know. I don't even play these characters, but they do look really fantastic. It's almost like they almost like new heroes in the game. And again, they still have the silhouette of Genji and Tracer, but they just look, I mean, they look fantastic. So I honestly feel like this is one piece that I'm going to kind of pass on. This is one thing that I personally don't really care too much about because of my involvement with neither of these heroes.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know what I mean? It's not worth it to me. So maybe next year, these will be worth 100 tokens each and there'll be new all-star skins. But for now, I'm actually going to pass.
But, what is worth it for you? All those new Pachimari plushes that they're releasing
Pachimari plus!
for
Oh,
eight,
man.
$8. Like, I know they're, like, on the small side, but when I
Yeah.
saw those, I was like, oh my god, I gotta tag Slambo.
Yeah, no, man, my wife is going to leave me because I ordered a bunch of Beanie Babies as far as she's concerned. So.
Yeah, we'll definitely be talking about that on Heroes Never Die on Wednesday. But anyways, let's go ahead and let's jump into our main discussions, technically. So we gotta talk about what's going down in Contenders Korea because they've officially wrapped up. In the grand finals, we saw Kondu Panthera going up against Runaway. So those that haven't followed the scene, KDP, or Kondu Panthera, is a completely restructured team after the London Spitfire kind of took their prior roster going into the inaugural season. Their Overwatch League, and as we saw, London Spitfire went on to win it. So there are a lot of question marks about KDP going into this, and they've looked pretty good overall, especially on, like, Yunjin on the Brigitte throughout all of Contenders has really been one of the highlights, and KDP has run the Brigitte a lot more than these other Contenders Korean teams, so it's definitely kind of put them at the forefront. And then Runaway, this has been a team that you and I have followed since, oh man, as long as I can remember, and it's been a roller coaster, for a lack of a better term, when it comes to Runaway, because this is a team that always seems to do well in tournament play. But they have failed to really achieve that first big victory since, honestly, like the beginning of Overwatch. This is a team that made it to the grand finals in Apex Season 2, which went to a 7th game, where they lost 4-3 against Lunatic High. Our soulmates. They also made it to the finals of the Nexus Cup, in the summer of last year, where they lost 4-0 to the best Chinese team in the world at that time, which was Miraculous Youngster. They also made it to the Apex Season 4 finals, where it also went to a 7th game, and they lost to GC Busan, who, that was when they had qualified for Apex in their first attempt, and they royal roaded their way to victory. And, GC Busan also got picked up by the London Spitfire, and then, going back to APAC Premier last year, they lost again to GC Busan 4-1. So seems like every time this team is in something, they make it pretty far, and like the win just slips through their fingertips, but they always put in, a hell of a contest. And I know over the years, there's been a lot of changes to this roster, and kind of like looking back at the original roster, there are only 3 players on Runaway that still remain on the team. those being Hoxel, Bumper, and Stitch. So, we've seen a lot of faces across the board for Runaway. We've seen a lot of pink jumpers in the arenas. Runaway is definitely one of the bigger Korean teams out there, and have been since the beginning of Overwatch, and they finally got their moment. And I'll be honest, like, when I watched this, I legit cried. Like, this has been a long time coming. Like, we've seen Runaway come up short time and time again. It was kind of like the same case with me and Reunited. Reunited, when we talk about the European scene, was pretty much the same situation. This was a team that got branded the, hashtag forever seconds. And, they went under like 20 different names of Reunited or We United or E United or Reunited, what have you. But it was the same case for them. And then when they dissolved, then it kind of became a lumen shadow, behind Runaway. And, at times even with Spider in the pick'ems, because, we brought that in. So at least one of them is broken. I don't know what that's going to mean for Spider moving forward. Hopefully he'll be able to break that claim as well, so we can give that distinguish to someone else or another team or what have you. But I just want to get your thoughts on, the moment when you realize that, Runaway finally came out with that win, because, like, this is, like, the first finals where all three of us, Spider included, we were all rooting for the same team, and that never happens.
Yeah. No, you said that right before the show, and that stood out to me because we never have, and we're all friendly about it, we're all cool about it, but it is rare that we are all on that same frequency. And there's just been this redeemable quality about the Runaway roster. Really, like you said, even though the core three, they have been there a long time, it's about the pink jumper. It's about Runner. It's been about the mom, Flowervin. Like there's, it's become more than just the team that we've kind of all fell in love with some aspect of it. And I think also that forever second has made it more endearing. Like, you have to admit that also made you feel loyal to them, because it was like you didn't like them because they were number one all the time. You liked them because you liked them. And no matter what, they still had one of the most loyal fan bases. They had the most iconic look to them. And for them to finally do it, on a big stage right leading up to the expansion slots of the Overwatch League. Like, what great timing do you want to have this on your resume, being scouted by, Totem? Don't be surprised if this roster ends up in Atlanta. Atlanta wants to field like one of the best teams, so they're going to be really looking for one of the top teams. And they even mentioned they're looking at the teams in the Southeast region, aka Korea. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, don't be surprised if this is like a team that looks to be maintained and picked up by one of our new expansion teams. So great timing to do it. But I do want to say I cried too, man. I got emotional. Like you said, it's been way too long for this to happen, and feel like, yeah, they've got some first place, but this is one that mattered. You know what I mean? This is one that mattered.
Yeah, absolutely. And man, talk about this one, 8 maps. This was a series and a half, really. So leave it to Runaway to always bring it to, that final map. And it did not start out so hot for Runaway, because there were a lot of things to kind of watch in this one. So we started at map 1 on Legion Tower, and it was very obvious what Runaway's plan was early. They were looking at focusing on Yunjin, who has been playing on just astronomical Brigitte for KDP throughout this. But we saw some pretty bad engagements by Runaway pretty early on, which allowed Decay to earn a quicker Graviton Surge. And, that Graviton Surge ended up resulting in a team kill for KDP, so they ended up flipping the point at 26%. Slime had, some late sound barriers, and he had some pretty good plays, too, with some environmental kills, as did Coma for KDP. I haven't seen so many environmental kills in a series by Lucio's ever than I did in this 8-map series.
Lucio's back, baby. I mean, that's why also,
Right.
he's back, so.
That is true. But anyways, Bumper ends up finding 3 with an Earth Shatter, which ends up putting this in 1-fight territory. And the Graviton Surge comes in, finds 2, so Runaway ends up walking out with the round 1 victory. So moving into round 2, we saw Twilight trying to push forward, but doesn't quite do that. So Bumper ends up falling early, which allows KDP to secure that first cap. We do see Runaway flip the point after the Coalescence is invested, which drops Yunjin. So again, he's pretty much been the focal point for Runaway. So Runaway flipped the point at 17%. And KDP just have a really hard time leaving that dropship. And what's kind of weird is, like, Dean has been running the Pharah kind of like throughout this, and we don't really see the adaptation coming out from KDP to deal with what they're going up against. And Roar ends up dropping the Shatter from the side, but it's immediately met with a sound barrier, and he ends up getting countercharge, and Runaway ends up getting the team kill to secure the first map. So, you know, it's obvious early on, Runaway's plan is, okay, we're going to focus on Yunjin because he's really been the enabler for KDP throughout the playoffs on Brigitte, and we know that KDP is, in most situations, going to be running that Brigitte, so that's going to be their main target moving forward. So we ended up going to Eichenwald, which ended up going to a time bank, which was a pretty back and forth contest. But we open up with, you know, KDP on the attack, and Koma just finds Hoxel just immediately right off the bat with the Widow headshot. And that opening pick allows KDP to secure the first 2 ticks, but Runaway are able to regain control because Janu helps track down Mafero with the Wrecking Ball. So we did get to see a little bit of Wrecking Ball, and, you know, I kind of want to get your thoughts on Wrecking Ball right now. So I know it's still pretty early on with Wrecking Ball. We've seen him in, I'm not going to say, like, in a lot of matches so far, but there seems to be a lot of experimentation being done right now, and seeing, like, kind of what role Wrecking Ball is going to be having moving forward. I wanna get your thoughts on the impact that he has had so far.
What I've seen throughout what we've watched, be mostly in the, like, non-Korean contender side. I want to speak to that first. Is that we haven't seen a lot of good play with it. We've seen a lot of attempts to play it, but it hasn't gone very well. Where on the Korean side, you know, we're seeing a little bit more of really, I'd say, like, right there in Eichenwald in particular, it felt like it was a surprise because they weren't expecting it. It was something different. It was something new, and it happened to work out because of the, you know, the distance they needed to close for the point. And then for what he does, I mean, he does disrupt a push, and he is very good at getting away, kind of surviving, and maybe even creating like a distraction or a cannon fodder at times of a push as well. So, I mean, I'm a little timid to really commit to say who's been the best, but I will say that I feel like we're going to see him. How we see him today is not how he's going to end up being in a couple weeks. So it's kind of weird for us to really even predict or assume how he's going to end up playing out. But really, I see potential for me personally on him with a dive comp, you know, with a triple tank dive comp. I'd like to see more Winston Diva wrecking ball offenses. And then as far as defense goes, I think he pairs nicely with almost any tank. It's really just the play style. Like, you just can't be in there super deep. You're just using your ball to zone, you know, use your grappling hook to zone when they're doing pushes. And then when they do push, you really have to coordinate with your other tanks to knock them up in the air and time that with that Winston leap or with the DPS dive. Because it's just it's like the knock up, you know, from Doomfist. You have a nice 1.5 seconds where the target cannot strafe or move quickly. So I don't know. I see, you know, that's kind of how we've seen him be used tentatively on all sides of the house. Where he's going to belong, I think, is, again, we're going to be in one of those 2 roles. Certain maps on defense, if there's a good setup, or really tight chokes to push through. And then on offense, he's going to need to be paired with, I think, at least Winston, probably Winston Diva, to be somewhat successful.
Yeah, we've seen some different things. So we've seen, like, kind of like Doomfist Wrecking Ball do some pretty good things. over in contenders, and we've seen some tanks really being able to, get across the map really fast, but end up engaging too early and kind of like alone, where the wrecking ball just kind of gets punished. But we have really start to see the stall potential from the wrecking ball, and that definitely came at the forefront at points in this series as well. But getting back to Eichenwald, for the KDP attack, it was a struggle. Like, they only finished with 1.8 seconds left. And a lot of that was just because the ult efficiency was firmly in Runaway's favor kind of throughout that contest. With Runaway on their attack, it was smooth sailing. They put in one of the quickest Eichenwalds that we have seen in quite some time. They completed the map with 5:07 left in the time bank. And, I looked at that, I was like, okay, like, feeling pretty good about this. And then
map 1 in the books. Here we go to map 2 victory. Let's go, right? All right.
Yeah, you would think so, but that was not the case. So KDP come out. They don't have any changes. Neither do Runaway on the time bank attack for KDP. Dean ends up finding a nice angle and drops Twilight in the back. Hoxel is the next to fall, and KDP end up taking the objective on their first engage. So not a good start for Runaway's defense here. So Dean switches off of the Pharah, opting to run D.Va, which at this point we are already into overtime, just due to the fact that, they only had like a minute on their attack. So Janu's mech ends up breaking, and KDP end up finding 3 eliminations. So Runaway tried to do like a long wraparound, but end up getting caught in the Graviton Surge. But KDP ends up getting zoned off the cart via the self-destruct, and overtime burns out. But KDP basically, they weren't quite at the gate, but they were pretty close to past the bridge there. So they made awesome progress for the time bank that they had. So going into Runaways, with 5 minutes on the clock, just, it's hard to say what to expect in this situation. I felt very confident, and then I felt so flustered at the end of it, because KDP did end up taking the map. So Janu opens up the map by going over the top to take care of Dane in the sky. Hoxel ends up moving in, only to get charged by Roar, and Roar throughout this series had some absolute ridiculous charges.
Yeah.
I think it was like at this point in the contest, it was like 80% like successful pins with the charge, which is so astronomical, and it's definitely getting the better exchange in that regard with the Reinhardt battle. But on the Runaway time bank, KDP do a great job at holding the choke point, and, there's already 2 minutes off the clock at this point. We see Decay come in with the Graviton Surge, and, the clock is really starting to get away from Runaway. Bumper falls early, the sound barrier is basically wasted by Runaway, and they try to push forward, but they get eaten by the barrage. So it's just like time and time again, like these direct rockets are just finding value for Dean, and it forces Resurrect from Slime in this case, and Runaway are basically down to 45 seconds. Roar looks for like that flank shatter on the side there, but he ends up getting scouted out by Stitch. Hoxel ends up getting whipped by Yunjin, which forces him to switch to the Sombra, which was enough to kind of like stealth his way to the point to, trigger the overtime. Stitch ends up coming in big with a 2k with the Deadeye. So Runaway, start to bring this back. So they secure the first objective in overtime, but then the Graviton Barrage combo comes out, and that's enough for KDP to shut Runaway down in map 2. But man, like 5 minutes just kind of like down the drain. It was.
You felt, and I remember like knowing that combo was up.
Mm-hmm.
And just kind of knowing it was just futile. Like even before it was over, you're just like, man, this is over. And I mean, I'm just gonna jump in and say at this point, you got to think from Runaway's perspective. Somebody in the back of their mind, somebody was like, not this again. To have that much of a time bank and to let that slip away, a lot of teams can start to fall into some pretty dark territory, some pretty thick quicksand, psychologically. But yeah.
Yeah, then we went to Temple of Anubis, which, no surprise, ended up being a draw. I mean, that's what Anubis is known for. So I really don't want to go over that, just because Anubis kind of like plays out the same in almost
Freaking 2 CP.
every
We get
series,
it.
man.
Yeah,
Two
yeah,
CP,
got it.
lol. There's a reason why it's called Draw Anubis. And it happens time and time again. Maybe some more tweaks need to be done to that map in particular. I don't know. But anyways, moving on to map 4, we went to Watchpoint Gibraltar. And this is a pretty interesting one. So Runaway were on the attack first. Janu ends up eating a charge early, and that came off of like a prediction of the teleport engage from Runaway. So Runaway basically came out with the Symmetra that went to get the high ground immediately. That did not happen because of the charge. So Roar ends up getting a really quick Earth Shatter. He ends up finding 2 in that. But Slime throughout this is able to keep Bumper sustained. So he's keeping Bumper alive. So we see the Graviton Surge being invested by KDP, which keeps Runaway at bay. Janu ends up getting caught in yet another charge. We see, some Doomfist play, which ends up finding 2 for Huxel, but he ends up getting killed by Yunjin, and the cart starts to roll towards that first objective. So Huxel kind of going uncontested on the Doomfist here. He ends up hunting down Koma with the Meteor Strike, but he only drops Koma low, but he's there to find that uppercut and slam combo to complete that kill. So we see the Dragon Strike come through, and Dane ends up finding a 4K for KDP. So they heavily invest their ultimate economy to prevent Runaway's momentum at this point. So we end up seeing KDP drop that Space Dragons combo on the high ground, which ends up finding 2, which also leads to 2 stagger kills as well. And Dane's Hanzo just keeps Runaway at bay as overtime ends up expiring. So looking at the KDP attack, they come out with triple tank. They have Hanzo as their sole DPS. And Yunjin ends up swapping over to the Genji, so not opting to run the Brigitte in this instance. Runaway end up securing the high ground and end up diving down on top of Roar. And a lot of that was just due to his aggressive positioning. So Stitch ends up finding Koma as Huxel is just cleaning house on the Genji, getting a ton of dash resets. He ends up getting into the backline and finds both of the supports. And Yunjin, who is on the Roadhog in this case, he ends up finding the 2K with the whole hog after Runaway gets caught with the Earth Shatter. And that allows KDP to secure that first point. So KDP, they make some more swaps. They end up going to a quad tank, which, I thought was kind of interesting because when we talk about tanks, usually Europe is, the tank-heavy region.
Don't you put Europe in a box? Don't you put them in a box because of maybe
they are always in a box
history.
because this is a region that constantly runs 303 to the ground, and we've seen that throughout Contenders Europe in the playoffs. But anyways, so KDP end up cruising through the Hainer phase, and they have just under 3.5 minutes left to reach that yellow rectangle box of victory. Huxel ends up finding a rocket punch onto Roar. We see the Graviton Surge coming out from Decay, and just the cleanup is all there for KDP. So we see Twilight switching over to the Ana to, try to combat the quad tank, looking to get those Bionades out. And Slime is doing an awesome job at just delaying, but Decay has the Graviton Surge, and it's just too calculated for Runaway to deal with, and KDP end up securing the map win. So, we're going into map 5 with Runaway down at this point, 2-1. And, just like Gibraltar has been kind of an interesting case because usually this has been a map that is completed quite often, but that was actually not the case in this series.
No, it was a bit different, than we were expecting, but I feel like at this point, like Runaway is starting to maybe hit that panic button a little bit. Now they were remaining calm. They appeared to be like steady Eddie, but it was a bit of a different Gibraltar than we're used to seeing, and they seem to just kind of be fine with this one, like taking the loss here. They were okay with it. It seemed like they just wanted to move on to Oasis as quickly as possible.
Yeah, something else I kind of noticed throughout the series is we saw a definite lack of, Widowmaker play. which
Yeah, not a ton of wait, and then it wasn't. I mean, other than like that instance with the Genji swap, there wasn't a ton of Genji like we're used to seeing. There's still some Genji, but not as much. I feel like.
yeah, it's been weird though, because it's like we've kind of like gone through the stage where kind of like throughout all of the last patch, we saw a ton of Widowmaker play. Kind of being kind of the initiator in most situations, just looking for those opening picks. But the landscape has changed to a lot of triple tank type looks. We have seen a lot of Sombra in this current patch,
Yeah,
which
a
was
lot of
really
Sombra.
like a huge shock to me because like going in knowing that Wrecking Ball was kind of entering the scene, a lot of us kind of expected kind of like Sudo dive with like triple tank with the Winston, the Diva, and the Wrecking Ball, and we kind of looked at the new Sombra and we didn't quite know what to make of it because they kind of went towards, that scout or like infiltrator type role for Sombra now that she has, perma stealth and, her translocator and, not being able to contest while stealth. And what's happened is Sombra's been basically been worked into these dive compositions where her hack is basically used as the initiation for the dive. So whoever gets hacked is the dive target. So a lot of times we're either seeing like them focus on the Brigitte or the Reinhardt in some instances, and then that's the cue to go. But like when we kind of like look at the ladder scene right now, that hasn't really been the case from what I've seen. So it's
No, because you need that coordination. To
right.
your point, like you need that synergy, and you can't always get it. And sometimes you get a good hack off on the right target. But if teams are expecting you, especially in public games, like you're going to get turned on quicker, or you're not going to capitalize on that hack you got off. So, but yeah, not to jump in and cut you off, but I think that we're going to see. I mean, and also, to your point, that they did, make her hack a little quicker. And I think that on top of everything else they've done to the kid, not just her mobility now and her survivability, but it really does come now down to when a target maybe does overextend slightly, is that she also defensively is able to kind of punish that. So like, someone does dive in too far, there's not even like, okay, this is the target to dive on, but that's the target everyone burns and cancels out the push altogether for the attack.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I really like about this patch is that there is like a very like kind of like polarizing feeling in regards to the actual meta kind of just across the field. Because what we're seeing in the pro scene hasn't necessarily trickled its way down into what we've been seeing on the ladder, which always isn't the case. So it's always been kind of interesting to pay attention to that and just seeing the differences between the different levels of play.
Yeah, I just got to say real quick, it's a combination of adding these new dynamic characters and also the reworks they're doing. Even though we are getting new characters on a somewhat slow schedule, they've spent a lot of time on some pretty aggressive reworks and changes to some characters that really we haven't seen panned out all the way or are used to their maximum ability, i.e. Symmetra. Another character we're going to see used possibly more in the future in the right way, but either way, it's an exciting time and it's a fun meta to pay attention to because it doesn't really have one.
Absolutely. So we moved to map 5, which was played on Oasis. This one went all 3 rounds, and this one was, man, like that opening round. This was a 99-99 round, and really what opened it up was Janu eating the Graviton Surge from Decay. Which was
That's right.
really the turning point,
Man.
and that's what ended
I
up.
remember that.
That's really what flipped it for Runaway. So a huge play off of the Diva to secure that first round. But man, like that was a crazy, first round. We saw both teams coming out with the 303. Roar ends up coming in big with another charge, ends up pinning Hoxel. KDP end up pushing forward and just find the kills. They got the initial capture. Bumper ends up blocking the Earthshatter, and we see Twilight invest in that Coalescence, which really helps sustain Runaway. And, we saw some Graviton Surges in this particular round that just did not see the value. There wasn't a lot of follow-through, and, sometimes it was just due to the fact that there was, like, a counter shatter after, or there was just enough sustained on the other side via, the support ults. But the Graviton Surges just were not getting quite the value. And, when one did get eaten up, that was an absolute game changer in that regard. So looking on to round two, this was just a complete 180. This one was a shutout for KDP. They took it 100-0. Yunjin ended up finding an opening pick on Bumper, and Dane was again on the fair, just raining down rockets on the point. And Bumper had a really hard time, kind of engaging in this one because he was the focus and the first one to fall throughout this round. And Decay, his energy on the Zarya was just through the roof, and he was just cutting through Runaway. So going into round three, it was Stitch looking to deal with Dane's Pharah. He was on the McCree in this round. Janu ends up getting isolated early, which opens things up for KDP to secure that first capture. Dean ends up displacing Runaway with the boop. Roar catches Slime with a Fire Strike, and Dean ends up coming in big with some direct rocket hits, ends up finding the Pharmacy from Runaway, which was absolute monster. Bumper ends up getting caught alone by Roar, and, Dean again, he wins the Pharaoh duel, and, KDP just rally up. They have all of their ultimates at the ready. Bumper ends up getting caught alone in the back, ends up eating a barrage from Dean, and, Runaway just aren't able to touch the point. But, this particular map, I mean, really the control maps in this series were just so back and forth.
Heart attacks is the right word for some of these. Heart attacks.
Absolutely. But to me, the Ilios one still takes the cake, which we'll get into. But going into map 6, we got to see the esports staple Kings Row. And this one was another one that went to Time Bank. We did see, a bit of Siamin Su in this one. So, we got to see him sub in for a few of these maps in particular. Yeah. But, we saw a lot of Ana on this particular map as well. A lot of that just doing, just because of, kind of like the open sight lines. Kings Row is definitely one of the areas that has a lot more vantage points, really, for the snipers. So that's why we do see quite a bit.
Safe corners throughout the whole map.
But I want to get your thoughts on this one because we saw quite a bit of stall coming out from Runaway, and we did see Janu on the Wrecking Ball in this one. What do you think it is about Wrecking Ball that makes him so vital when it comes to the delays and just stalling points in particular?
Well, it's really just twofold. It's one, his ability to get back to the point. It's a very particular skill, and especially tough on Kings Row with some of those narrow corridors. But once you get the momentum, if you can really not, collide it all with any edges, you're able to get back quicker to the point than almost any other character. I would dare to say quicker than Lucio at times. And that's really just with the momentum you get from rolling on the ground and using your grappling hook. And then it's his ability to, I would say, I want to use the word kite, but that just seems like inappropriate. It seems, like his name is more indicative of what he does. But his ability to use those shields and get the most out of it for being really contesting with 5 heroes, 4 heroes close is going to give you the most shield. And then once you pop that shield, it's not even about dishing out damage. It's merely about using your ball form, your shift, and then your grappling hook to just avoid movement. It's a little bit more predictable than, when Diva is in her mech and she's trying to stall, right, how they kind of just fly up, down, left, right. And it's a good strategy. So it's a little bit more predictable than that. But because of the knockback mechanic, if he can just get going on that momentum, it's a lot harder to hit that ball aim-wise than you're thinking. I mean, of course, if you have the right hero composition, the delay becomes a little less potent, but he definitely, but just between the speed to point and then the ability to just kind of be mobile in between the shield cooldowns is what makes him particularly annoying. And if he can get his ult up, the ult does not seem to be as powerful as I want it to be quite yet, but at least it slows down a push or really does make the DPS or the support change their route possibly right now. But it's not going to be a huge kill potential. Sorry. Anyway, but as far as delay goes, man, he's fun to roll down hallways with.
Yeah, you're gonna bowl people over. What's not fun about that? So going into Kane's Row, this was match point for KDP. So at this point, it was 3-1. So Runaway would have to walk away with 3 straight victories, just to take the title. And what better way to start your attack by completing the Kane's Row with 4:20 left on the attack? A pretty respectable time on Kane's Row.
Feels like shades of Eichenwalde, though. So that's what I was thinking. Like, uh-oh, I've seen this
Yes,
before.
we've seen how this played out. But on the KDP side, they ended up also completing a map, but they did it in overtime. So looking at the time bank, we had a very clear win condition, right? 1 tick. That's all we need. So Runaway does what a lot of people would do. When in doubt, goats it out. They run the 303. They just look to bully their way onto the point. They end up surrounding Roar, and Janu gets demeched. So Slime comes up with a kill. Roar ends up falling to Siaminsu, and Runaway take the map to keep their hope alive. So the map pick would go to Kondu Panthera, and they had brought us to Route 66 for map number 7. And this was another...
I hate this map too, man.
This is a really hard map to complete in a lot of instances.
It's just such a long map.
That too. This one did go to another time bank.
I know, and I was like, is this still be the longest match in the history of Overwatch? Oh my gosh.
Just about, because if you watch live, I know it was over 4 hours. But on the KDP side of the attack, they finished with 18 seconds left. We did see, a little bit of Sombra, a little bit of Wrecking Ball coming out from Runaway. We saw, some EMP Minefield combos coming out, which kind of helped Runaway stabilize. We did actually get to see some Widowmaker play in this map in particular from KDP, and it was Decay on that roll. At one point, he had opened up with a 3K, and that was enough for KDP to secure that second objective. But Runaway, they again came out with a very good time. They eased the card in with, just under 4 minutes left on the clock. And looking at the time, KDP had a really hard time getting the ball rolling here. Slime ended up coming up with the first kill. He ended up dropping Roar, who is, the KDP main tank. And KDP were running the Genji on their attack here, and, with only, a minute on the clock, that was just not enough time for them to build a Dragon Blade on their attack. Slime actually ended up dropping the Genji with a boop, and, we saw a lot of Lucio kills in this series.
Of boops, yeah.
More so in map 8 than anything, but KDP just, they had very little progress, so, again, this put Runaway in a very clear win condition, to force at map 8. And for Runaway, they end up... Haxel falls early by Yunjin, but Bumper ends up getting an early Shatter. Dean ends up getting demeched, and then the Nano Boost comes in for Runaway, and they use it on their Brigitte. So, tons of mace to the face. That's really all you need. The cleanup was there. They pushed it in to force a map 8. And that brought us to Ilios, and... I don't know about you, Slambo, but when I watched Ilios, honestly, I think that was... you could argue that was probably the best map of Overwatch we have seen. It was absolute craziness.
Just for the stakes and then how everything was playing out. And Ilios has the potential to have a lot of environmental kills with the 2 of those points. They're just designed for them. But it just felt like we could, like you said, we could not have got a more exciting ending to this story. It was just fun, fast-paced, and frantic.
Absolutely. So we opened up on Lighthouse. Both teams opted to run the 303. Roar kind of opens it up
desperate
with a fire strike, ends up hitting a tree. So not the only tree to get lit ablaze within the last week. Probably too soon for our Warcraft fans. But that's besides the point. But Roar gets super aggressive, and he just barrels through Runaway, and already has an Earthshatter up for the next engage really early on. So KDP, they come out ahead. They get the first capture. They have a pretty big ult advantage early on in this series. He ends up Roar ends up dropping the Shatter, and Runaway just collapse because Roar catches all 6 Runaway members in the Earth Shatter. And, next engage, KDP, they drop the Graviton Surge up against the wall. And, Runaway, they do a pretty good job at getting the quick reset. Only a couple of their players got caught in a grab. The other couple of members just, went to do the quick reset. So, at least they didn't lose a ton of progress at that time. Twilight ends up investing the Coalescence in a losing fight, really, so really wanting to get that one back. And Bumper ends up eating Roar's next Shatter, so Runaway finally are able to flip the point at 94%. And we see the grab come in, it catches 3, and Roar is the first to fall for KDP. So Coma comes in on the Lucio, boops Bumper off the map, so they end up exchanging Reinhardts in that engage. Haxel rallies up, which keeps Runaway alive, and he ends up getting the best of Yunjin, and the Roar comes down from... the Shatter comes down from Roar. Bumper again gets booped off, and KDP flip the point and secure the first round. But man, Bumper, he could just not get away from Kulma. Every time Bumper was there, Kulma would be there with the right click, and Bumper would just poof right off the map, and it's heartbreaking because like he's trying to just get on the point,
right?
But Lucio's on Ilios in particular are just hunting for those environmental kills.
You have to make decisions to like you said, go to the point. And there's like this huge risk that you will get booped and going this way is bad or turning your back this way is bad. But it's also like claustrophobic on some of those points. You have to do it at times, So yeah, that was tough. It was tough.
Yeah, because like when you kind of like look at the way the lighthouse is, like if you're on either side, like you're very susceptible to the boop. If you go kind of like straight in the middle, there's always a chance that you could get booped more than once and still end up falling off the map. But Bumper could not catch a break. Okay, so we ended up going to a well in round 2, and Runaway ends up coming out with a straight dive. They end up seeing the 303 comp coming out from KDP. They end up going back to the dropship. Of course, we get a mirror match again on the well. And Slime is the one finding the opening frag, ends up booping Yunjin into the well. And Slime ends up getting the first 2 kills for Runaway. Bumper ends up finding 2, which just allows Runaway to keep pushing forward. So they got the first capture. Bumper ends up catching both support players with the Earth Shatter. So KDP, they're sent packing yet again. But Coma, story of the map, ends up booping Bumper into that abyss, and Roar secures 2 picks to flip the point at 80%. So the tank ultimates end up coming out from both sides, and lo and behold, again, Coma boops Bumper into the well. So at this point, it's already the 4th time Coma has bested Bumper in that regard. The Shatter ends up getting denied as Coma, again, finds another environmental kill. So Roar comes in. He goes for a point-blank Earth Shatter, which, it does okay, but Janu ends up getting dropped. So KDP are at 99% going into overtime. And Runaway are able to flip the point. Siaminsu ends up tossing the Grev as Runaway just push forward. Roar is the first to fall, and KDP... are just getting, brought down. Bumper ends up getting gunned down by the micro missiles, but Slime finds 2 huge environmental kills, so we're at 99-99, and Runaway come out on top. So at this point, man, I was sweating. I don't know, what I was more impressed
sweating.
By.
Yeah, man, that's an understatement.
I don't know if I was more impressed by the position of the Lucios, or just the fact that they had walked away with 10 environmental kills at this point on this map alone. But you could not feel comfortable regardless of where you were in the map at this point, if you were on either side, really.
No, but I don't know. I'm thinking of the players in the situation on both sides of it. I mean, there's so much going through your mind, and it felt like, and they had to be mentally exhausted for playing all these maps in these series. And Kongdu is we had it. All we have to do is finish it. and Runaway is just trying to finish this fairy tale ending.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, God, it felt it was like exhausting. It seemed so. Oh, I want to watch it again now. You hear your breakdown of it again and like your detail. I'm like, I really want to go back and experience it because, to your point, it's one of the best Overwatch matches.
Absolutely. So, Ruins would be the grand finals decide map. Roar ends up coming out very aggressive, ends up getting punished early, and Yunjin is the next to fall. Bumper ends up surviving, which allows Runaway to get that advantage to secure that first cap. So Roar comes in with that Earthshatter, gets absolutely no value. We see the self-destruct being invested by Runaway, ends up finding Coma in the backline. And this is where Bumper really turns up the aggression. He even pushes forward, ends up finding the 3K. And, he tries to lead in with the charge, but ends up missing it. But it's okay, though, because, he just turns around, hits a side shatter, ends up finding 4 with it, and KDP just drop. So we're already at 99% in overtime. And Bumper, gets a little bit of retribution because his shatter finds Coma. So, that had to feel good finally catching that jumpy boy frog after all this time. And really the cleanup is just all there for Runaway, and Runaway, they finally walk away with that grand finals victory. And man, seeing just all that pink confetti, just the reaction from the crowd. But man, as a player on that team, that just has to feel like the biggest weight getting lifted off their shoulders. Just knowing, just the story of that team and the different looks that they've had, and how, there were times where they were just uncertain about whether or not they were going to continue playing. But Runner, he pushed the team to stick together, and they gave it one more shot. And Runaway came out on top after all of this. So, man, like, I get emotional just, like, talking about it. It's so surreal to finally be able to put that in perspective, seeing the journey that they have been on since day one, to finally be in Contenders Champions, or just winning a major for that matter.
Yeah, and doing it in a way that it's just I don't know. It's just the way, like I said, the timing couldn't be better. Something I said earlier, and I really do feel that way, is they needed this to happen just to get that monkey off their back. And for Runner, to get the monkey off his back in particular, because he is the name and face of this franchise, whether he's out there or not. And for Flowervin also, Team Mom, to get a little love in there too. It's been I don't know. It was powerful and exciting, and I really didn't want to watch it live, of course, just for the time frame, but I was worried to wake up to the news, and I woke up to some great news.
Yeah, because I remember when I woke up, like, I hadn't watched the series. I was like, okay, I cannot, like, go through the day without knowing. Like, yeah. It would be next to impossible for me to, scroll through my Twitter feed without seeing it, or, going on any of the Discords. But I saw that initial, like, headline on over.gg, and I just, I almost collapsed. Like, I was just so overcome with emotion at that time. But it was a busy week for Runaway, because not only did, they have the grand finals, but there was also, earlier today, a show match, which I have not watched yet, but Runaway ended up doing a show match against the current Overwatch World Cup team for South Korea, aka, the New York Excelsior with, Carpe,
right,
and Fate. Now, I don't know if I want to, like, spoil how the show match went. I'll definitely...
It's a show match, yeah.
I'll definitely have, the link in the show notes. I'm still gonna go back to watch this, but it was a best-of-5 series, and Runaway did come out on top, and in true Runaway fashion, it went the distance, right?
So... It went the distance, baby. Wouldn't have it any other way, and Hawksall was playing some sick Doomfist, so check it out.
Absolutely. So, from what I've heard, it seems like... Okay, so, for one, this is a show match. Obviously, South Korea, they have their World Cup group stage this upcoming week. So, in a show match, they're not going to tip their hand with what they're going to be doing. So, regardless, Runaway has been a team. They've been at it for a while. South Korea's team has not had as much scrimmage time. They've only been together a few weeks, but either way, this was all for fun. So it was just an extended, competition for Runaway, and I just love seeing, these matches that we typically wouldn't get to see otherwise. So definitely check this one out when you can. But we gotta talk about the upcoming group stage for South Korea because that one is first up. And we do have some pretty big news in regards to that World Cup group stage.
Yep.
So, for those that don't know, like the World Cup group stage kicks off next weekend with the South Korean group stage. So, South Korea is looking to defend their home turf against the likes of Russia, Finland, Taiwan, Japan, and Hong Kong. So the World Cup is played on patch 1.26, aka this is the Wrecking Ball release patch. This is the same patch it's currently being played in the Contenders playoffs. And it's worth noting that all maps are in the pool. Now, Slambo, you and I have been watching Overwatch esports for a while now, and there's a pretty clear consensus, at least amongst the players, when it comes to maps. They do not want all 16 maps to be in the pool, because it's next to impossible to prepare for every single map. Where exactly do you sit in that discussion? Like, are you for it? Are you against it? Would you rather see a more condensed, map pool? Or are you okay with something being this expanded?
Okay, so my answer is for something like the World Cup, I think that it's fine to leave everything in because we're trying to, really, I mean, as much control as you want to put on it, there's so many factors and so much variation and so much of a differentiation between talent that almost adding in these unique, weird maps we wouldn't normally see is part of the challenge of the World Cup because you're playing on the world stage. When it comes to Overwatch League, I do think a condensed map pool leads to more competitive play because then teams twofold have better time to prepare their own strategies and then to watch footage on other teams so they can build a strategy or a game plan going into the next week matchup, which just means, again, we get better quality games with more forethought and more possibility for analysis. So again, I mean, if this is purely an Overwatch League question, we need a condensed map pool that's non-negotiable because of the quality of game. For the Overwatch World Cup, we expect a weird and wild and fun ride, and I feel like this fits the bill. So my gut says keep it in. For the World Cup, all the maps, enjoy it, figure it out, have fun on Horizon. Woo!
Yeah, I think like the biggest question mark that a lot of people have is like they're just worried about the level of play if teams are kind of spread too thin when it comes to the preparation for all of these maps. I'm kind of in the middle ground. Like obviously we've seen at the highest level the more condensed map pool really just makes things more concise. But we have like a wider array of talent at the World Cup level. We have a lot of contenders talent. We even have talent, straight from, ladder in some instances. Obviously, the Overwatch League players have a pretty big impact on a lot of these teams as well. But it'll be interesting to see like how this is going to play out because there are some maps in particular that do tend to kind of have like their own set meta. Like obviously Junkertown is probably the first one that comes to mind. We've seen a lot of like pirate ship variations. We've seen a lot of like Hanzo, but that might not be the case in this current meta. So
right, that's what I mean.
Who knows what we're gonna see?
A lot of fun. We got new heroes, new metas. We got Blizzard World, which we still haven't wrapped our head around, I don't think. So it's gonna be a lot of fun, man.
So in regards to these maps, each match is going to be beginning on a predetermined control map. So starting with the second map, the loser of the prior map will get to choose the map. So the first map is always going to be control, second map on hybrid, third on assault, fourth on escort, and if necessary, for the tiebreaker, it will also be control, but that one has to be different than the first control map that was picked in the series for the predetermined. And when we look at the World Cup stages, only the top two teams are going to be advancing to the BlizzCon stage. So when we look at the group stage, each team is going to face the other teams once. And really, like, the big news that actually dropped kind of earlier today is that in regards to casters, we will see the return of ZP for the World Cup. And joining him is Jake. So
Good
Jake
old Jakey.
from the Houston Outlaws is going to be making his caster debut. There is not an analyst desk from what we've heard on the competitive Overwatch Reddit. But I'm really excited to see how Jake is going to do in this role. My only concern, and this is something I have to bring up with Jake. Jake gets really excited and ends up he talks really fast. I'm hoping that doesn't get too much in the way from kind of like his casting, but who knows? I'm gonna give him the benefit of the doubt. I'm looking forward to having that more pro player insight at that sort of level. So I'm really curious to see how these two are going to pair together. So this could be something that could open up further possibilities for Jake as kind of like a behind the desk or just as a commentator moving forward in Overwatch esports. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, very articulate guy, a good guy to transition to that role. And I think he would bring a lot to the table because he takes whatever he does very serious. He has a very analytical approach to life. So certainly exciting, intriguing. And for me to see ZP, I mean, I'm at home, Totem. He makes me feel like home when he casts.
All right, so looking at this region, obviously we have South Korea, as I mentioned, which is NYXL plus Carpe and Fate. Finland is really the other powerhouse team. This is a team with a mixed Overwatch League roster. So we got Taimu, we got Linkser, Fraggy, Zappis, Big Goose, Shaz, and they have Davin from Team Giganti being the sole contenders player on that roster, and that's kind of a sad story too with Giganti, because that was a team that was kind of picked apart for the Overwatch League, and Davin was the only Giganti player that wasn't assigned to an Overwatch League team, and then since then, Giganti kind of they absorbed another one of the Finnish teams. And they haven't slowed down at all since then. They'd won the prior season of Contenders Europe. Not so much the case this season. But despite all of these changes, Giganti has still been kind of at the forefront for Europe's Tier 2 scene. So across the board, Finland is stacked. It's just a matter of how some of these other interested teams are going to do. So when we look at the field, Russia is probably going to be the other contender out of this region. This is a very solid mix of Overwatch League talent as well as talent from contenders. So from the Overwatch League, we have Shadowburn. From the Fusion, we also have Mistakes. So they're the two Overwatch League players, and then complementing them, we have pieces from Windstrike Team, who are formerly known as CIS Hope. This has been one of the other very prominent European teams, a very tank-heavy and tank-oriented team that do really good in this current meta, but unfortunately, they fell short in Contenders Europe in the playoffs, and actually lost to Angry Titans not too long ago, but, I'm always excited to be Shadowburn. We're probably not going to see that much emotion from him. Maybe Fusion need to bring back the puppies going into the World Cup. I don't know, but... I'm always excited to see Shadowburn, especially if we get to see, some Pharah play.
Oh, well, yeah, always Shadowburn, but other than that, it's Tonic, a well-known tank player with the European Tier 2 scene. So rounding out that roster nicely, but my expectations are pretty low for Russia this year, though, to be honest with you. Shadowburn's a nice set piece, but this is a tough group stage for them to go through. A lot of really good teams, and I think some a wild card team we got to keep on the lookout for.
Yeah, so in regards to like taking the approach of building a World Cup team, South Korea kind of went the route of, we're gonna pick up the majority of one team. Another team in this group stage also did the same thing, that being Japan. So Japan opted to take the entire roster of Cyclops Athlete Gaming, who are currently playing in Contenders Pacific. And as a matter of fact, they are playing in the grand finals, which will be in September as they go up against Talon Esports. So, Japan has always been like one of those really exciting teams. Same with Taiwan or Chinese Taipei. They're kind of, in that same region. But with Hong Kong and Taiwan, what's kind of interesting is, a lot of the pieces from those two countries are on Hong Kong attitude. And because, they hail from two different countries, they're basically split. So, Hong Kong basically has a combination of Hong Kong attitude as well as, some, players that I'm not really familiar with. And, Taiwan basically has a mixed roster of like Hong Kong attitude, Nova Esports, as well as Maki Esports. So, a lot of mixed rosters, a lot of unknowns with these two teams, but this was a team that made it to the Contenders Pacific playoffs, but they did fall in the quarterfinals. So, when we look at these teams, Japan, Hong Kong, and Taiwan, it's hard to really gauge the success that we're going to see. I would imagine just based off of the synergy that Japan would be the likeliest to kind of break out of that. But it's hard to really feel confident that these three teams are going to be able to, pull off the upset against a team like South Korea or Finland or even Russia in some instances. So, when we kind of look at the landscape, South Korea definitely like a shoe-in to win. Finland should have it in the bag, but I really want to see how Russia is going to do, but I'm worried that they're going to be too dependent on that tank duo to really put them at the forefront when some of these other DPS duos, especially when, we compare like Finland and South Korea, are really going to be able to open things up for the top tier teams in that region.
Yeah, I told you earlier, my gut says that Russia, they don't have what it takes this year. And the other thing I said is that there's a wild card in this group stage, and I think it could be any one of those three teams, but I want to lean Japan just because of kind of their own ecosystem at times. They maybe can come up with some really unique wrecking ball strategies, or they'll have maybe a dominant style of play they develop, a form of that's what I want, Totem. I think that's more just what I'm looking for from a spectator's point of view, is just something kind of fun, different, and new from particular. I think Japan has the potential to do that, but any one of those three teams, Chinese Taipei and Hong Kong as well, who knows, or Taiwan, forgive me. But I don't know. I feel like there could be some really fun and exciting stuff that come out of these games. Maybe not the best teams we've ever seen, but I'm looking forward to maybe learning, or maybe we see some things picked up from this particular group stage. A very creative potential here.
Absolutely. So in regards to day one matches, I'm not going to cover all 3 days, but obviously day one is going to be where most of the eyes are. So we'll open up with Russia going up against Hong Kong. We'll see South Korea versus Taiwan, Hong Kong versus Finland, Russia versus Japan, and then the final game of day one is Finland versus South Korea, which ultimately is probably going to decide who is going to get the top seed out of this group stage. And, seeding is very important when it comes to the World Cup. So, really, whoever comes out ahead on this one, 99% chance they're going to be the top dog in this particular group stage. But, look at...
like it's not going to be Korea. We're crazy. If we're pretending Totem, we're crazy.
Okay, so... looking back, right? So, New York Excelsior, they dominated, the majority of the season. They kind of fell short, semifinals, they had their free ride to the semis. That did not pan out. They, hold their cards closer to the chest. in the show match, which, we really can't really say too much about, but, they did lose to Runaway. But knowing that NYXL was slow to adapt, does that concern you at all going into the World Cup?
No, it really doesn't, because it's just not the same stage. It's not the same competition, and it's not the same stakes. So I really am not going to put any concern into Korea until they show me in a big stage, in a big moment, that I have something to be worried about. And frankly, they've just never shown that weakness, especially in the Overwatch world. They have complete control of it. So I'm I don't know. Like, I'm done doubting Korea, man. I'm done hating. I'm done saying there's going to be something or some kind of change, because I keep being surprised that they always maintain.
Yeah, but it's always funny, kind of like reading the kind of like the knee-jerk reactions from the Korean scene. Like after London won, everyone was like, "Well, why aren't London the World Cup team?" Things like that. But kind of looking at this group stage, I want to get like our record projections, where we think their teams are going to be when all is said and done. So for me, like I'm just gonna go from the bottom to the top. I think Taiwan and Hong Kong are, going to be on the lower end. I have more doubts about Hong Kong than I do Taiwan. I think Hong Kong is going to be the team to not walk away with a win. I think they'll go 0-5. I have Taiwan at 1-4. Japan being in fourth, with a 2-3 record. I have Russia 3-2. Finland losing to South Korea, but still advancing, with a 4-1 record. And I think South Korea, they'll come out swinging. I'm expecting South Korea is just going to bowl their way through their group stage. This is an easy group stage for them. I think they'll walk out 5-0.
I have the exact same thing, but I'm going to go out on a limb. I'm just going to do it here just to be bold. Swap Russia and Japan's records. Same exact list. Let's go Japan.
All right. Well, with that being said, be sure to tune into the World Cup. Obviously, this is really one of the only majors that's going to be going on outside of the Contenders Finals, which was also kind of tied into these World Cup group stages on the Fridays. So hopefully, we'll see a bump of viewership for Contenders, and with it being attached to World Cup, I'm very confident that that is going to be the case. But, World Cup is always exciting. And I definitely want to keep an eye on the viewership numbers when it comes to the other medias for the World Cup, just because that too is also part of that broadcast deal that we're seeing for, the ABC networks as well.
Totem, can you hear me?
Yep.
I'm having a lag spike.
Oh no. Don't lag spike.
I think I'm good.
I
think
I'm
good.
I'm
good. I'm sorry, I dropped out for a second though. What did I miss?
You didn't miss anything.
Oh, okay.
I was just talking about how the World Cup is going to be part of that broadcast deal. So
yeah, certainly. No, I think that's a good. Well, at least for some of these platforms, they might generate some interest or some curiosity. I think that's a good time for them to get involved and at least, to test the technology, make sure the broadcast stuff works out. Maybe, do some testing. I think that's going to be an important piece of that, because you really want a nice polished product by the time season 2 kicks off with all the branding and the new expansion teams. But I think the World Cup is a safe place to test. I'll just throw that in.
Absolutely. So expect, World Cup fever to strike across the nations. But with that being said, guys, we're going to go ahead and close out the show for tonight. So if you guys want to help us out, one of the best ways to do that is to leave us a positive review over on iTunes. We're always looking for insight on how we can improve the show. So, as I mentioned on our prior shows, expect, a couple of changes moving forward. We'll definitely be talking more about, kind of like the World Cup and Contenders, and obviously the All-Star Game, as we're kind of we're kind of in between stuff, so we're going to be experimenting a lot more with some of our discussion points and some of the themes that we're going to be focusing on. So bear in mind with that moving forward. And we have Overwatch Recall. That is our Overwatch content. Really just like listing. We have like all the Overwatch League, and Path of Pro podcasts, and we have listings for that posted every Sunday night. So be sure to check out the weekly recall on our website at owlnshow.com/weekly recall. But Slambo, since Spider isn't here, why don't you go ahead and let our listeners and viewers know where they can get a hold of ourselves and our podcast over on the social media.
I'd be happy to. We can start out, but if you'd like to email us, go ahead and shoot us an email at contact@owlnshow.com. Our Twitter and Instagram both can be found at OWLN Show. Our website with all the feeds, including our Overwatch recall information, is at www.owlnshow.com. Our YouTube page, we're almost there to our 100 subscribers to our custom link. So go search OWLN Show and give us a follow on YouTube. There will be a link in the show notes. You can find us on Discord at discord.me/OWLN Show. And we're here live on twitch.tv OWLN Show for Overwatch League Network Mondays at 7 p.m. Pacific. Heroes Never Die, our variety Overwatch show, is Wednesday at 5 p.m. Pacific. The Back Cap for our Tier 2 and Contender show, Thursdays at 7 p.m., but, more to come. Spider streams Friday on the Twitch channel, Friday 7:30 p.m. Pacific. And lastly, Totem takes it over for Saturday stream, 7:30 p.m. Pacific. And you can find me on twitch.tv/Slambo or at Slamboverwatch. And I'm one sleepy Slambo. And the Totem, where can they find you?
Well, I'm over on Twitter at TotallyDrunkCTR, and we also have Spider on Twitter at SpiderGD, or on Twitch at twitch.tv/SpiderGD. And with that, guys, we're gonna go ahead and cut it out so Sleepy Slambo can go get some rest. But for now, guys, that is going to do it for us here tonight on Overwatch League Network. Again, this has been episode number 45. I am Totally Drunk, joined every so often by my soulmate Slambo, and we hope to see you guys back on Wednesday for Heroes Never Die. But until then, guys, have a good night.
Thank you for listening to the Overwatch League Network. Be sure to follow the show on Twitter at OWLN Show. The theme music for OWLN is the main theme and victory theme guitar remix by Michael Mack.